Most gear cases are filled from the bottom plug, and then you fill it from the bottom until it comes out the top. The nice one about this is you fill it from this side, and then it pushes all the air out and comes out this side. That's why this side says vent. So anyway, you take those two plugs out, and I'm gonna just top it off from here because I already looked at the gear fluid and it looks really good. It's that Mercury Cruiser green gear fluid. It's not black burn or anything else. I'm just gonna top it off. Okay, important note here. That's the original piston. This is the new piston. It's a WSM piston. And I'm showing you this shoulder down in here. See this? How this moves back and forth? It limits the travel. Okay, well on this piston, they use a clip placed in here. There's a groove in here. And there's lots of videos on YouTube where you can see how to, you just push the clip in there and you have the hoop down. But that keeps that pin from coming out. In the original setup, the pin was held. These are press fit. Okay, let's face this way. So these are press fit around the rod. Okay, and then no matter which way it went, it could only go so far in the piston. So the piston, the OE piston, does not have any clips in the sides because the pin couldn't come any further this way because this is pressed on that. That was on the rod, so it couldn't move out. So anyway, long story short, when you order replacement pistons, if they're not the press fit pin, wrist pin thing that they originally had, you have to update the wrist pin bearings. And this is a Wiseco part number, but it should work for you on this application. And these are, what kind of pistons are these? These are WSM. And they've actually got this nifty coating because they're Platinum Series, and it's supposed to be anti-friction. So far, I mean, I don't, other than having to get the new parts, I like them. So, and you can see how much skinnier this collar is, and it, of course, will slide. Sorry, I'm doing this one-handed. It will slide on there. That's why this one has the clips to hold it in. The pin is also, on the new pistons, a little shorter than this. I'm just showing you this so you can see. So anyway, there's lots of videos on how to assemble the piston, the rod to the piston, so just follow those. You know, as far as using dielectric grease or assembly lube for the needles, putting them in the rod, sliding all this together. So anyway, next I should have 3 pistons. Pin, line up your pins, count them, should be 26. Well, how tough is that? Okay, when you squish them in, to get them all lined up, and then you put them in the rod, and you push the pin out of the rod. Okay, so you put them down in there. You take one of these, you slide it down, and you flip it over, and hold that piece. Try to do this one-handed. So anyway, once you have that out, once you have that out, that's what you have. Okay, and that you're going to set inside the piston while you push the pin back through. Simple, right? Pistons ready to go. Piston rings installed. Piston rings, if they have writing on them, which mine do, there's a little teeny R, barely legible, always goes up. You want to fit it in the groove, make sure it fits in there without sticking, and that you can push it in the groove far enough to where it sticks inside the groove, where you can brush across the top, you know, like here's the groove, and across the top you can, you know, bridge it and still see light through it, meaning the ring can go all the way into the piston. Okay, and then there's pins. They're oriented the same way as the pin for the rod, okay? And there's a pin on this side and there's a pin on this side, on the bottom ring and on the top ring. And the way that I do is, I'm about to take off my gloves, I just use my fingernails and I push in around to the pin and squeeze on the pin, and then the piston will drop that one ring and it'll drop the second ring once I get this one squeezed to this side. So I start over here and I squeeze back this way until that gap. Like I said, the pins are right here, and I just repeat for all 3. Once I've got these in, then I'll just temporarily set the head on it with a couple bolts just so the pistons can't fall back out. Now, you take, see that? That's hitting the pin hitting the ring gap. Okay, so you want to make sure all of them have that. Now notice there's no movement this way. Because if there was, then that would indicate the cylinders wore out. So anyway, so we got good fit. Now if you run into a problem, you can just install the bottom ring, get it in, and then push it back up without letting the bottom ring come out, and then put the top ring on with your handy dandy piston ring pliers, and then slide it on there, and then just do the top one. I can do both, but I've done this a few times, so if you're doing this for the first time, the purpose of using my nail is I don't want to put the ring over the top of that pin, because if I do, I'll break the ring or push the pin in the piston. Either way is bad, okay? Because if the pin goes inside the piston, then the ring can move around, and what happens is those ports on each side, the intake and the exhaust ports, okay, this is the exhaust over here, this is the intake, that's the word exhaust, okay? Those are my numbers, 1, 2, 3. So anyway, the exhaust comes out here, right here, okay? This right here is water pump passages and whatnot. And like I said, this side is the intake, these 3 little covers, these recirculation lines, which we'll get into how important those are. So that's something I checked when I cleaned this block and all that other stuff. But anyway, like I said, you just want to make sure that the pins are holding. And like I said, this is a hand installation. I didn't use any hammers or force or anything else. So once it's right, it just slides right in there. Like I said, the piston itself is tight. Okay, so like I said, I'm confident, even though it's just a hone, that it's going to run fine. Crank. And there's a few things you need to see. This right here is a seal ring. Right here. It sits in that groove. Okay. And it sits right there, right where those patterns are where I put the oil. And there's these pins. Okay. And what those do is they keep these bearings from going. So on one side of the bearing, see there's a little small pinhole. That's to tell you straight up. The other side is the big hole. These are like the rods. They're broke. So the bearing halves are. And that little wire ring there holds them in place. They're caged bearings, kind of like the rod bearings. Like I said, these little seal rings, they have to sit in these grooves. Kind of like a camshaft actuator on a car. What they do is they seal the chambers from each other, because these are actually 3 separate pressure developing chambers for the 2-cycle operation. This right here, this is part of the casting process. It's not coming off. So at first I thought maybe it was melted aluminum or something that somehow got down here, but it's not. It's just Chrysler casting, so take it for what it is. Alright, so we're going to set this crank in there. I've placed all the rods as far down. Remember, I put the cylinder head on for a minute. And I've got the caps matching right there. And we're going to bring them up to the crankshaft one at a time and put the bearings in there, the cage bearings, with the dielectric grease again, get everything situated. And we're just going to kind of snug them all. We're going to spin it all the way around. And the reason is there's that machine mark from before, right there where it's machined. You take a pencil and you rub against that to make sure the halves are mated. And if they're not, you actually tap them just real lightly until you can get them flush, and then you tighten them down to spec. Okay. So, anyway, next scene will be the crank sitting in the block. Now, we see that is on the pin. That's on the pin. Okay. And this one, you have to really push on this one, but it's also on the pin. Oh, look there, I thought it was. Now it just went on. Must have pulled it back up when I was messing with it. Okay. So anyway, these seal rings, that's it right there. Okay, see I left the gap open. This one I turned around, because you can kind of turn it while you turn the crank, and then see the crank turns in it without it turning. So I'm going to turn that one 182, because when you put this other crankcase half down, there's a sealer we're going to use. It's anaerobic, meaning it seals in the absence of air. And whatever doesn't get caught in here, it squishes out the side, will remain rubbery. Same on the inside, so if anything gets on the inside, it just gets whoop, without damaging the engine. You know, like if you used regular silicone. So, anyway, and they call that gel seal 2 in OMC terms, and in Loctite terms, it is gasket maker 518 anaerobic. And then there's a primer to use too. So clean and prime Loctite. So anyway, got all that going. So anyway, now we're gonna put the rod bearings on there, and we'll be back in a minute. You can see how there's a surface there. That's from the break where they broke the rod. Okay. So anyway, we're about to set the bearings in there. You pull this up, you know, to the top. As you're spinning around, you might have to move these other ones around so that it'll turn without you knocking everything off. Basically, you just start here and work there. So, be back in a minute. Okay, so here's the cage bearing. What I do is I put 1/2 down on the bottom, some petroleum jelly or dielectric grease, whatever your flavor. And I've heard some guys say engine assembly lube only, but whatever. One time I've seen an engine come apart is because someone didn't put together a, you know, or if they were just extremely dirty. But anyway, I just walk it around until I get back to my first one, which is my last one. So anyway, you can see there's the split. I've got them all in there. The rod's pulled up against it. So now I put the rod cap in. And I'm actually going to go ahead and clean this and this off because I want those nice and clean for those surfaces to mate up. So I can always add a little lubricant, you know, from the outside edges after. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to do that next. And I've run my fingernail here. And if you catch right here, that means that this is too far that way. So you want to tap the top this way. And then if it catches as you come up, meaning this is too far this way, then you want to tap it that way. So you want to do that just with barely any, you know, just snugged until you get that where your thumbnail won't really hang. You can find the groove, but there shouldn't be a drop. Okay. So they machined that before they broke it. That way you can put it right back. Make sure that the brakes are matched up. So on the OMCs, the Johnson Evers, they put a 45 bevel on each side machine, and they have a special tool that clamps it, and then you tighten it, and then you let off and check it. But like I said, this is just as effective. So anyway, you know, if I get that just right, you can see the crack right there. So anyway, you just want to make sure your thumbnail doesn't hang in it. And then the torque spec is 170 inch-pounds. It's my handy dandy trusty inch-pound torque wrench, snap-on. So, and actually we're going to do that, and we're going to give it just a smidge of bolts. And of course there's a nice